I told people way back in October, November, December, this is not going to be a quick cleanup, even with President Trump. There are some sacred grounds, and I think they're medicine and banking. It's the two-headed monster for the fascism, bankers and doctors. They want you to be poor and sick, and they work together to make you poor and sick. So this is going to take a while. And notice that there have been no prosecutions for the vaccine that resulted in a lot of dead people and injured people. There's been no resolution and announcement of the Epstein files. I think that's a work in progress. We have seen an obstruction still for the central bank digital currency, and I'm glad about that. I think at the end of Trump's term, we're going to still have some very difficult problems that have not been resolved. I think he's doing a really good job regarding denutting the cabal with bankers and doctors and the elite, the geopolitical elite, like in Geneva and Davos, the visible part, the Davos. I think that behind the scenes, he's engineering a great deal of account confiscation among the elites. I've mentioned this before, and I will again. I've got a couple of military sources, and one of them is rather detailed. For the last 3 or 4 months, we have had a tremendous number of arrests of dangerous, nasty, corrupt, deep state agents. A lot of arrests, and I'm told there are about 25 important tribunals going on, and we only hear about two. Andrews military base is loaded with tribunals. I'm told that there are like 5 or 6 going on all the time. So there's a lot of arrests, a lot of tribunals, a lot of cleanup, but it seems that Trump has laid off on the medical side the vaccination damage and left that to Robert Kennedy, who I believe is having his life threatened on a regular basis. So the states might take over the anti-pharmaceutical battles, but Trump is doing a number of different things regarding efficiency in the government, regarding gutting elite accounts. It seems to me he spends more time as the head of the Space Force than he does as the head of the nation in the White House. And I know that's a pretty strange thing to say, but he's got a lot of priorities working at the same time. I think he's working a very clever plan in the Middle East. And there's a country that I call the little control country, and I don't mention its name ever. I try never. They're in the southeast corner of the Mediterranean. I call it the little control country. I think Trump is working a very clever plan, and it's for a limited war in order to prevent a much bigger war. I think he's leading some of the people, the leaders of that little control country. He's leading them onto stage, and he steps back so that we can see their actions, including in that little area that's getting wiped out, the little area that's where the canal, the Ben Gurion Canal, is planned. So I think Trump is very cleverly enabling a war. And I believe half the information about the war details is incorrect, about half. I believe the goal is to remove and to destroy Epstein databases in the little country. And in the other country, Iran, the goal is to remove the databases for extortion and sabotage and assassinations. This is very complex. Most of the data on the war is not correct. It's exaggerations, and it's really quite crazy BS lies. we're setting up for regime change. That's what I think is the goal, both nations. And what I'm hearing about the Iranian mullahs is something that is getting confirmed maybe a dozen times over the last few years. The mullahs, they're high priests. They're all billionaires with Swiss accounts skimming from the national oil and gas treasures. So they're a criminal class with robes on, acting like religious leaders. The people of Iran just don't want them anymore. And they've got an iron grip. And I think the more guaranteed is in the little country where the guy wearing the mask who goes by the name of Bibi, I think he's going to hightail it. And then we'll hear that he's dead when he was actually dead 2 years ago. Kind of like Biden. Biden was dead years ago and the first dead president ever to be the president of the United States, the first dead guy. I mean, we're watching a bit of a comedy. It's a bit of like Saturday Night Live. We got a lady now who's come forward and said, yes, I operated the auto pen, but she's not said that Biden was dead. That's what we're working toward at the top of the pyramid. And we're about here. We've got a little more to go. The pyramid of information, the auto pen, the threats on usage, the lock on budget spending for USAID, for Ukraine, et cetera. Okay, this is again from the military deeper source. Trump will request more funding from the European nations for NATO activity and weaponry. Trump is asking for the impossible because he wants to have France, Germany, Italy, Netherlands, and Spain refuse. And if those member nations of NATO and the European Union refuse to fund NATO to a greater degree, then Trump can say, we're not going to fund them either. And then NATO runs out of funds from legitimate sovereign sources and will have to resort, and it'll become well known, they'll have to resort to money laundering sources of funds for NATO. And then we got a narco NATO. The end will not be North Atlantic, it'll be the Narcotics Atlantic Treaty Organization. Narco NATO will be against Russia. And I'm hoping that the global military alliance can cut off the narcotics. Okay. I think Trump is working a game to get a refusal from the European nations so that he can dissolve and defund NATO, force them into a corner, and then have them dissolve. That is what the military guy is indicating as the goal, and it's not going to be quick. You got Trump, who's insulting Powell. I wish he would make dagger points about the BlackRock connection. That's been out of the conflict room. But he's actually saying, Powell, you're the chairman of the Fed. You should resign. You're a disgrace. You're representing the elites. You're not representing the households of the United States that need lower rates. Let me just give you a quick rundown of what's really important for inflation in the United States. There are a few. It's inflation based on interest rates, food prices, fuel prices, and insurance. And we need all of them to come down. Insurance went up a lot as a result of the COVID bullshit, the pandemic. I want to go on record again as saying that it was a planned pandemic. There was no pandemic. I have clients who reported about what happened in Wuhan in China. There were no deaths outside the city limits of Wuhan, which means it was not a biological event. It was a radiation event. The illicit lockdown was just that, illegal, illicit, and it destroyed a lot of businesses. Chris, I think we're going to get a rate cut, but not for the reasons Trump wants. And they're going to try to do an engineered bond rally across the entire yield curve. It's not going to steepen like it did last year. That's where short rates go down, long rates go up, so it becomes a steeper curve. I think they're going to see not a flatter. They're going to see the whole curve go down. That's what I want. And you know, the bankers might say we want it for our bonds that are underwater, but we also need that for the federal debt. I'm going to throw out a zinger that'll be a segue here. I've got it on pretty good authority, Chris, that Trump, if he wanted to, he could bring forward 100,000 tons and reduce approximately 10 trillion, maybe $12 trillion of the debt. He could do it next month. But we're not done cleaning out the deep state. And we're not done removing the risk that if it were put on the table, some of it would be stolen by the cabal. That is a very big problem now. We've got a lot of plans for global funds, the Saint Germain Trust, QFS being installed at the banking level, and it's being kept in the slow lane because the deep state and the cabal are not yet cleaned out. And it takes time. I think it's going to be another year.